everyone, this is Marika and welcome back to another session with me. So we are dealing with the fifth unit, right, which is Principles of Education and Teaching Learning Process. We've seen various aspects under this unit, which is teaching, right, the principles of teaching, learning, the maxims of teaching, and also the philosophies of education, functions and aims of education, right? Today in this session, we are going to discuss about a topic that is related to teaching learning process, all right? In this session, we are going to discuss about objectives, that is educational objectives, all right? Now, before we go on to understand what is educational objectives, right? Let us understand what is objectives, right? So, objective is a very common word, right? We use objective or goals very commonly, right? Let us first understand what are objectives, right? And we will see what are the educational objectives. And we will also be discussing about the characteristics of an objective in the education and different functions and types of objectives. All right. Now, objectives serve as a guiding path for any given process, right? If there's any activity that is to be carried out and fulfilled, if there is an objective given for the activity to be carried out, we know what is to be done, right? We carry out the activity in order to make sure that the given objective is accomplished, right? So, objective serves as a guiding path for a given action. Objectives help people move forward in the right direction. Now, if a person knows what the person has to do or where the person has to go, it becomes easier for the person to follow the path, right? And go on to a specific or a particular place, right? If the person does not know where the person has to go, it becomes difficult for the person to reach to the goal, right? The person may end up in an unexpected place, right? So as I said, an objective is a goal, right? An objective is something that is being aimed at. Similarly, the teaching learning process also must begin with a well-planned objective, all right? So that the expected purpose of the teaching learning activity is actually achieved, right? So as I said, objective is a goal. It is something that we aim at, right? So if we have a particular objective during the process of teaching and learning, right, with the right objective and with a proper plan which has objectives, it is easier to carry out teaching learning process. It is easier for the teacher as well as the learner, right? For any educational program to be effective, for any educational activities to be carried out effectively, there should be a well-planned objective or purpose of the educational activity, right? So that it becomes easier to select the right subject content, the right learning experience, clinical experience, and also the method of evaluating the performance of the students. All right. So when we have a clearly defined objective, when we have a purpose in our mind while we are carrying out the teaching learning process, it becomes easier for us to understand which teaching method will be the most suitable for the class, right? How can we evaluate the effectiveness of the class, and also what is the best way to evaluate the performance of the students? So with proper objectives on mind, if any educational activity is carried out, it becomes successful, okay? Now let us see the meaning of objectives. The word goal, target, right, are used in educational relation, right? We use the term goal, target, and also objective in terms of education, right? They are used interchangeably. Goal, target, or objective usually means a same thing in education, right? It means something that we have to achieve, something that we are working towards for. Now, let us see what is the meaning of educational objective. Now, educational objectives are certain statements, right? They are the statements which says or which expresses what the learner will know or will be able to do after a particular educational activity is carried out. All right. Now, there is a learner, right? Once the learner has attended any educational program or any educational activity, what will the learner be able to do after attending the educational program? The result of the educational program on the learner can be defined as educational objectives. So, these educational activities are certain statements, right, which describes what will the learner be able to do after the learner has attended an educational activity or an educational program, right? Now, let us see the definition of educational objectives. Educational objectives are the statements of those changes in the behavior of the learner desired as a result of a particular teaching learning process. Okay, so what is educational objective? Educational objectives can be defined as the changes or modification in the behavior of the learner which occurs as a result of a certain teaching learning process. Alright, so as we have studied education, we know that education brings changes and modifications in the behavior of an individual. So educational objectives are those statements that describes what are the changes that any given educational program or any given educational activities will occur in the learner after the learner has attended the educational activity. Alright? Now, educational objectives has two different aspects. The first one is behavior and the second one is content. Now, as we've been studying, education brings changes in the behavior of an individual, right? And educational objectives also has two different aspects, that is behavior and content. Now, what is behavior? Now, behavior here in the educational objective is student or learner centered, right? It focuses on the learner. Behavior here means what the student will know or what the student will be able to do after the educational activity or the educational program. Alright. Now, educational objectives have, as I said, two different aspects, that is the behavior and the content. Behavior is student-centered or learner-centered, and it refers to what the student or the learner will know or what the student will be able to do after the educational program is completed, after the session is over. Alright. Whereas the second aspect is content. Now, what is content? Content is teacher and subject centered, okay? And it deals with the subject matter, alright? So the two aspects is the behavior and the content. In the first part, we've seen it is the changes that we see in the behavior of an individual, in the knowledge level of the individual, whereas the second one, content, deals with the subject matter, okay? It deals with the content that is being delivered. Alright, let us move on to the functions of educational objectives. Alright, now why do we need educational objectives? What is the function of educational objective is what we are going to discuss in detail. Alright, the aim of education, as discussed several times from the beginning of the unit, is the overall development of an individual, right? And education is transfer of the knowledge from an individual, from the teacher to the learner. And it aims on overall development of the individual, right? So clear defined objectives are essential for the teaching learning process to be effective or to be carried out in an efficient manner, right? And if there is absence of clearly defined objectives, alright, if there are no clearly defined objectives, the education process, the evaluation that we do and the assessment that we do of the student is aimless without clearly defined objectives. If you don't have objective or if there are no objectives in the education system, there's no use of providing education, right? A class is delivered to the student with certain aim on mind, right? That these are the aims of this particular session. For example, if I'm dealing with teaching and principles of teaching, so the aim or the objective that I have is to make sure that the students learn what is teaching and what are the different principles of teaching and how can that principle be applied in the process of teaching and learning. right? So with a proper defined objective, when a teaching learning process is carried out, the teaching becomes effective. And also, without a proper defined objective, the evaluation and the assessment of the student is aimless in the education system. When we are imparting knowledge, when we are providing knowledge to the student, we must know what is the aim of us doing this, right? It is not just coming and speaking out about the content, but there are certain aims that is to be fulfilled. Therefore, before planning or carrying out any educational activity or any teaching learning process, proper and well-defined objectives related to the content that is being delivered must be planned, right? Having a properly defined objective makes it clear for both the student as well as the teacher to know what is to be done to reach to the goal, right? If you know that you have to attain this goal, you can have a proper planning to attain that goal. When you don't have any direction, when we don't have any objective in front, any goal that is to be achieved, we will not know what to do or how it is to be done, right? But with a proper objective, the teacher and the student can work together to make sure that the goal or the objective given is achieved. Now, let us discuss the functions of objectives one by one, all right? Now, educational objectives are very much necessary in the process of teaching and learning, as it gives a clear idea or clear picture to both the teacher as well as learner where they have to reach or what they have to attend by the end of a particular teaching learning session, right? When there are educational objectives provided, the teacher also knows that this is what I need to achieve by the end of the class, right? Even the learner will know what they have to do by the end of the class, what they should know by the end of the class. Therefore, a proper educational objective will provide a direction to the teacher as well as the student, right? That is the first function of educational objective. All right. The second function of educational objective is that it helps the teacher to plan the assessment and evaluation of the student in an appropriate manner, right? The method that is to be used to assess the student, the methods that are to be used, the procedures that are to be used to evaluate the knowledge of the student is also easier with a properly defined objective. All right. Now, if the teacher has the objective in the mind, the teacher knows that the student must achieve given objective by the end of the class, right? With the help of the teacher. In order to evaluate the student also, it becomes easier for the student. And with the help of properly defined educational objective, the teacher will be able to appropriately judge the students. The third function of educational objective is to provide direction for the teaching learning process as well as for the evaluation process. With a proper objective on mind, the teacher can take the lesson accordingly to achieve objectives one by one, and also the teacher can evaluate the knowledge gained by the students. The next function of educational objective is to help the students and the teacher find out the gaps between the actual and expected number of changes. All right. So as I said in the very beginning, the function of education is to make sure the function of education is to ensure the changes in the behavior of the individual, right? Also focuses on bringing the changes in the individual by the end of a given activity, right? So with the help of a properly defined objective, the teacher and the student will be able to find out the gaps that occurs between the actual and expected number of changes, right? The teacher has listed down certain objectives, right? And wants, for example, 5 changes in the behavior of the individual towards a certain topic, right? Once the teaching learning process is over on the particular topic, the teacher can find out the actual changes and compare the changes that is expected and the actual number of changes that has occurred. All right. And the last function of educational objective is to help the teacher to evaluate the effectiveness of their classes, right? With a proper defined objective, the teacher know that the student should know all of this, or the student should be able to carry out all of these activities by the end of the session. Now, once the teacher delivers the lecture or once the teacher shows the demonstration, the teacher will evaluate the knowledge of the students, right? The teacher will try to find out the actual changes in the behavior of the individual or the student. After the teacher evaluates the actual number of changes and expected number of changes in the behavior of the individual, the teacher will come to know the effectiveness of his or her educational program, right? Whether it was effective, whether it helped in bringing changes in the individual's behavior or not, right? So these are the various functions of educational objectives. Let us move on and see the different characteristics of educational objective, how an educational objective should be. The objectives that are formulated for any given educational program must be SMART, S-M-A-R-T, right? Now, what does the SMART stands for, right? We'll see that in detail. Now, educational objective must be SMART, as I said, right? Because it is the objective that sets the tone for rest of the teaching learning process, right? So while formulating the objectives, the teacher and the student must keep in mind that the criteria, which is SMART, must be met by each and every objective stated for the educational process. Now, the first one is S, right, which stands for specific. Now, obviously, for any educational activity, right, for any particular session of educational activity, there is a topic selected, there is a content selected, right? So, the educational objective for a given period, right, or the selected content must be specific to the content that is selected and being taught in the particular class, right? For example, if today's class is about formulating objectives, I cannot formulate objectives about principles of teaching, right? So according to the session that is being carried out, the objective must be formulated specifically to the content that is being taught to the students in the particular session, all right? Now, having a specific learning objective will make it easier for the teachers as well as the learner to attain the objective. It becomes easier for the teacher to teach the class and also for the learner to understand the class with a properly defined objective. Okay, so the first characteristic is specific. Specific as in whatever is being taught to the student in the given class, the educational objective must only be about the particular class which is being dealt. Alright, so a good learning objective breaks down a huge topic or a big component into small parts, which is manageable. The next one we have is M, right, which stands for measurable. Now, for any given activity to be carried out and to see if there's any progress, we must make sure that the objective or the goal that we have is measurable, right? So, objective must be stated in a measurable form rather than in ambiguous manner. Only if the objectives are written in a measurable manner or measurable term, the teacher can evaluate the effectiveness of the class and see the progress in the class effectively. The next one is A, which stands for attainable. Now, from the term itself, we can understand the goal, the objective must be attainable. Unrealistic objectives must not be set in the educational program, right? Now, if the objectives are very broad, it makes it difficult for the teachers as well as the student to attain the objective, right? So, objectives must be narrow and it must be only related to a single learning procedure, or it only should have a single learning outcome, right? If there are various components included and if it is very broad, it becomes difficult for both the teacher as well as the learner to achieve those objectives, right? So whenever we formulate the objective, we have to make sure that it is attainable. Next, we have R, which stands for realistic. Now, objectives, while being formulated, the teacher and the student must keep in mind the availability of the resources used for the teaching learning process, the abilities and capabilities of each and every individual in the classroom. right? So we must know the ability of the student to understand the topic. We must know the capability of each and every individual. We must know the individual differences of the learner, right? Resources that are available to carry out the teaching learning process, right? With all these things on mind, we can formulate a realistic, attainable objective, all right? And the last one is T, which stands for time bound. A well-written objective or a good objective must have a time bound, right? There is an objective. To reach to that objective, you must know how much time you have to attain that goal or to reach to that goal, right? So a well-defined objective must be within a time frame so that the teacher as well as the learner has the idea of the time limit they have to attain those objectives, right? So if I take an example of our classroom, right? In class, we are given 45 minutes of time and the teacher comes with certain objective on mind and delivers the lecture or conducts the class, right? The teacher asks question about the topic that was dealt in the class. So within a given time period, the teacher had objectives on her mind, right? And the teacher has taken the class and at last the teacher evaluates the effectiveness of the class and evaluates whether those objectives were met or not, right? So an objective should be SMART, which is specific, measurable, right? Attainable, realistic, and within a time period, which should be time bound, all right? Now, let us see the criteria of objectives. The first criteria of objective is objectives has to be stated in the form of changes in the behavior of the individual. Okay, so as we know, we are providing education to bring modification and changes in the behavior of the individual. Right? So the objectives has to be stated in terms of behavior and the changes of behavior that is to be seen in an individual. Okay, now the objective of each unit, right? We have different objective for a particular topic, right? Specific objective for a specific topic. So the objective of each unit or each topic must contribute to the total development of an individual. The next criteria is the objectives must serve as a motivation force for the teacher as well as for the students. And the objectives must be stated in a manner which reflects continuity, sequence and correlation of various learning activities. Alright, so when we state objective, there are certain criteria that we have to keep on mind, right? The objective must be a motivating factor for the teachers and the students as well. The objectives of different units or different topics must make sure that it contributes to the overall development of the student. Objective must be stated in the form of changes in the behavior that is to be seen in the individual. And objectives must be stated in a way which maintains a continuity or sequence and correlation of various teaching learning activities. Alright? So these are the various criteria to keep on mind while formulating objectives. And finally, we have classification of educational objectives. So there are two major classification of objective. The first one is institutional objective and the second one is departmental objective. All right. So what is institutional objective? Institutional objective can also be referred as general objectives. Okay. So institutional or general objective is a set of statement identifying the major skills all the graduates or all the students will develop after the completion of their particular course that they have taken up. All right. So by the end of the course, right? For example, if I take BSc Nursing, it is a 4 years course. So by the end of 4 years of BSc Nursing, a student will develop the skills to critically think, right? To handle the patient competently, to be able to serve as social workers in various community settings. So there are various different objectives of the institution. Like after 4 years of BSc Nursing, an individual with all these qualities and all these skills will be developed, right? So that is a general objective of nursing of the institutions, right? That is called as institutional objective. So under institutional objectives, we have various sets of statements which refers to the skills that will be developed by the individual after the completion of the entire course. All right. And the next one is departmental objective. So departmental objective are also set of statements that identifying the skills that will be acquired by the individual who are taught within a particular department. Now, as we join BSc Nursing, as I said, right, an institutional objective will be there. By the end of 4 years, we will develop an individual who is able to have critical thinking, make proper decision, provide competent nursing care, and work as a social worker in the society, right? Now, that is institutional objective. In BSc Nursing, as we are promoted to different class, we get different subjects, right? In first year, we go for clinical practice of fundamentals. So before we are sent for fundamental practice or clinical experience, we are given a set of objectives that we are supposed to achieve after completion of fundamentals posting, right? Similarly, when we reach second year, we have medical surgical nursing, right? Again, we'll get the departmental objective of medical and surgical nursing, that by the end of the posting of medical surgical nursing, the student will develop the following skills, right? Those are departmental. The institution has an overall development of an individual, right? Those are called as general or institutional objective. And under each department, we have different objectives that every department serves, right? Those are known as departmental objectives, all right? So while formulating departmental objective, one must make sure and ensure that departmental objectives are related to the institutional objective. All right. So we have to make sure that all the skills that are developed under the departments, right? Overall institutional objectives. All right. So there are two different classification of objectives: educational objective, that is departmental, and institutional. Institutional is after the completion of entire course, maybe BSc Nursing or maybe MBBS or maybe BCom, right? After the completion of the entire course, the individual will develop this following skills, right? That is institutional educational objective. So for every course, we have different departments, right? So under those departments, the skills that an individual will develop comes under departmental educational objective, right? We have to make sure that the departmental educational objectives correlate and contribute to the institutional objectives. That is it for educational objectives. All right. I hope the class was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you and have a great day.